Good evening. This is Robert Sungenis coming to you once again on the Robert Sungenis Live program. Today, for July the 14th. Half the month is gone already. As you know, in my role as host of this program, I will endeavor to answer your questions on any subject whatsoever to the best of my ability, based on our Catholic faith, our tradition, the Bible, and just about anything else that will help me answer your question. As you know, we are here on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 8 to about 10 p.m. Sometimes we go longer. A couple times last week we went to 10:30, and I did that because there were a few more questions left on the board, and I got through all of them, believe it or not. I look back on the questions that my good friend Tim collates for us all, and there were like 45 questions that I went through on one day and another 40 on the previous day. So we're going at a pretty rapid pace. And I'm just amazed that I can cover that many questions in the course of 2 hours, especially as long as I spend on some of those questions. But here we are. We're doing well. So let me see. Is there anything I need to tell you about? Yes. Something very important. There's some mark on my, I don't know what that's from. All right. Look at the Frito Bandito here. Anyway, I just made it worse. And that's going to bug me all night. Anyway, last week I had asked the audience if anybody knew of a speech program out there. And the last time I got a speech program, I guess about 3 years ago, it was okay. It was just a lot of work to make it sound right. And they just had not perfected the art of voice recording. And this one does something that I got this from my friend Dennis from Germany. Dennis, he is up on technology, I'll tell you that. And he is so proud to do that because he is in Germany, and believe it or not, they have no Catholic apologetics in Germany. So Dennis is trying to start his own apologetics organization, so to speak. And I came in quite handy for him because I've written all the material already. And so it's just a matter of translating it into German. And now our next step is to put it on voiceovers, and all you do is you put your manuscript, and you can cut it up into pieces if you want, of course, and you put it into their little reader, and it reads it in whatever language you choose. And I think they have about 15 different languages, and they even have different kinds of dialects. Like, for example, Spanish, they have Castilian Spanish, they have Mexican Spanish, and they have U.S. Spanish, whatever that is. I don't even know there was such an animal. But you can have 3 different dialects for Spanish. English, you can have U.S. English, you can have British English. And I still love their voices, the British. So I'll be using those a lot. And you can have, it's a U.S. English, British English, and Indian English. Yeah, Indian English from India. So anyway, you put your text in, and it puts it into voice for you within seconds. Yeah, I mean, you can have, let's say, 1,000 words put into voice in 3 seconds. Now, there is an art to, I'm finding out, and I'm learning very quickly on how to use this. I spent all day on it today, translating or transcribing one of my books. You have to learn how to, put exclamation point here or a question mark here. And if you make sure that you make a division after a comma so that the machine will read the next line, it reads it in perfect timing and unbelievably with the right intonation. Like for a question mark, how we go up in our tone with a question mark. Hi, how are you today? Okay, so you went up on the word today, and then on a, indicative sentence or declarative sentence, you want to stay level to the end, or you might want to go down a little bit. Say, I am fine today. Say, today you went down. And it does all that for you, believe it or not. And wow. So, yeah, that was like I got a toy for Christmas when he sent me that link. And so I'm going to be spending a lot of time, as you can imagine, transcribing a lot of my books into audio because this program is so good and so quick. So that was one of the things I've been doing just to keep you up to date. So all I had to do was ask, and somebody out there knew about the program, and it's probably one of the finest programs. It's made by some foreigners, and they come and advertise it in their accent, but they speak good English. Or should I say they speak English well? At any rate, they have perfected it, and one of the greatest tools that I have ever come across for someone in my profession. And then, of course, we have the book translator that can translate from DeepL, DeepL.com, in case you're interested, that I just got the week before. And what that does is it transcribes all my English books into whatever language I want. And it does a fantastic job. I mean, it's not like you have to go in there and, at least I haven't done that much of it, but Dennis tells me that you don't really need to do much correction. You can just take it as it is. There may be a couple things you have to correct. That's how good they are today. So I am just very happy about that, of course, because what we're going to do is, I'm going to translate as many of my books as I can. And they have this thing where you can translate a whole document. And depending on how much you pay to get in, and it's not that much, 100 or so, you can put a whole document in there and it'll translate the whole document for you with all the pictures. And put the pictures in the same place you put the originals. And it'll translate it into the language that you choose. So, my goodness, talk about saving time. That thing is a real godsend. So, I had 2 Christmases. I had one last week and I had one this week. And I got my little toys and I am off and running. So, anyway, just thought I'd bring you up to date on those 2 things. What else do we have? And by the way, I just happened to read somebody's comment over here. They have Portuguese too. And they have Brazilian Portuguese and they have, Portuguese. So, yeah, very nice. What else? Okay, so Lawrence Gonzaga, my trusty good friend, did all the work by himself. I didn't even ask him to do it. He revamped the website of robertsungenis.org. pretty colors, great graphics. It just looks like some pro spent weeks on this. But he's so good at it now that he can pretty much do it within a couple of hours or so. But visit the website, robertsongenis.org. You'll see the new format we have, and I think things are easier to get to. And I don't think we have the discount up on the site right now. And I better hold off on that because, by the way, I will not be here next week. I am going, believe it or not, on a dinosaur dig in Paluxy, Texas, of all places. Yeah, I've been invited, all expenses paid, unbelievable, to go down to Paluxy, Texas and dig for dinosaurs. And if you know anything about dinosaur digs, that's one of the most famous places in the United States, Paluxy, Texas. And they have found all kinds of good material. And one of the most fascinating things they found is dinosaur footprints, like a Triceratops or a T-Rex or Brontosaurus. And they have found human footprints inside the dinosaur footprints. Really? Okay, so, I mean, we have all the evidence. It's just staring us in the face. But men, as godless as they are, just don't want to believe it. But, and I've heard about it. I've seen pictures of it. And I finally have the opportunity. And there are going to be 3 professional paleontologists down there, dinosaur diggers, who are going to lead the way. And what a privilege. I'm bringing 2 of my children down too. And so they'll be exposed to all that. But, the mind of man, let me give you the example of what I'm talking about. The guy who's leading the charge on this dinosaur dig, Peterson is his name. And I exchanged an email with him. And so we're excited to meet each other because he knows all about my work. And he was an evolutionist, taught in the university, I believe. And 30 years ago, he was invited to come and look, examine, whatever he wanted to do, at one of these dinosaur footprints with the human footprint in it. Okay? And he looked at it, sort of couldn't believe his eyes, and then left the place where it was and said he could not sleep or eat for 4 days. Can you imagine? 4 days. That's how much it bothered him. Why? Well, it's kind of hard to fake a human footprint and a dinosaur footprint and get away with it. Some people may be able to do it, sell it off, but not for a paleontologist. Okay? He knows those things like the back of his hand. And that's what bothered him, is he couldn't find any way to deny it. Now, why is this significant? Well, because evolutionists tell us that the dinosaurs occurred 65 to 70 million years ago. The closest they give to Homo sapiens, humans, is 300,000 BC or 200,000, depending on what authority you talk to. Okay? So we're not even close, according to the evolutionary scale, to the dinosaurs. We're at least 64.5 million or so years away from them. All right? That's what they've been teaching us for how many years since Darwin? And yet, we find these human footprints and dinosaur prints. And not only that, as I've said on this program before, we have found dinosaur bones that have been either broken in the middle, or we can go in from the top or the bottom, like say a femur bone of a T-Rex, and we can see blood vessels, we can see collagen, we can see blood cells. Okay, I mean, they're right there. You can do carbon-14 tests on them. And I just don't know how these guys get away with it. I really don't. Because anytime these things come up, the evolutionists just deny that they exist, or they try to find some other explanation that doesn't make sense. And as I told you, we had an incident where this Mary Schweitzer, I think from the University of Colorado, found a T-Rex bone with blood cells, blood vessels, collagen. And her boss told her, his name was Jack Horner. Little Jack Horner sat in his corner thinking of a way to do away with Mary's evidence. And he couldn't think of one, but he told her, you come up with one. You come up with an explanation of why this isn't, 1,000 or 2,000 years old, why it has to be, 70 million years old. Poor Mary, in order to keep her job, she went to school for how many years to get a PhD, whatever, and get her sheepskin on the wall and her six-figure salary and all the prestige that goes with that. And here, everything's on the line. So you either prove this is 70 million years old, he told her, or you lose your job. Wow. This life can be real cruel, can't it? Anyway, so, Mary comes up with some flimsy excuse that even the evolutionists laugh at, but they'll accept it. Anything but having a divine foot in the door, as another evolutionist said it. Speaking of evolutionists, the very guy that I'm talking about, Peterson, who couldn't sleep and eat for 4 days after he saw this human footprint and dinosaur footprint, became a full-fledged creationist on the 5th day. He said, there's no way I can. No way. I've been totally wrong about everything. Every single thing I've been taught is wrong. Can you imagine? And that was 30 years ago. And he's been at it ever since. And he's the one that invited me down. So, wow. I just want to meet the man for the man's sake. The dinosaur, human footprint is just icing on the cake. This is a true blue human being who listened to his convictions and accepted it no matter what the cost would be. And of course, he's doing much better than he was if he worked for the university. Okay? Being under their cloud, under their restrictions and all that stuff, living under all that fakery, he knew he couldn't do that. So he's a happy man. Speaking of another evolutionist, though, you may remember the paleontologist from Harvard, and his name is Stephen Jay Gould. Died, 1998, was it? Yeah. Stephen Jay Gould, one of the most famous evolutionists in the world. He was invited to see the very same dinosaur human footprint that Peterson saw. So Mr. Gould went down to Paluxy and took a gaze at the specimen and stared at it for about 5 minutes, they say. They watched him. They all watched him staring at it. And he says, after 5 minutes, he says, "This is impossible," and walked away. So there you have it. One man's trash is another man's treasure, as the saying goes. And this is where we are. This is the state of science today. Okay? So don't get all hot and bothered about science. These guys know nothing. Absolutely nothing. Everything they know is wrong. Everything. Okay? Everything. So now people wonder, why do you get off on this Copernicus stuff? Because everything they know is wrong. I can tell you that. Same thing with the evolution stuff. Okay? Trying to get the message out, that's another story. Because they own the media, they own the magazines, they own the grants, the rights, everything. It's all locked up for them. Okay? They have to go, even the Pontifical Academy of Science. They won't let any any creationists in the Pontifical Academy of Science. The very Catholic Church. None of them are allowed. Well, Stephen Gould or Stephen Hawking, they were allowed to be members of the Pontifical Academy of Science under John Paul II. Oh, yeah. See, we Catholics, we're up and coming, you see. We're accepting science. And we didn't do it with Galileo, but now we've come of age. Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's all about prestige and money and fame and fortune. That's what it's all about today. And don't let anybody kid you. It's the Catholic Church is steeped in it. It's all about prestige today, about living comfortably and not sticking your neck out and getting along with the world. That's what it's all about. Okay, so now let me go on. Speaking about the discount, when I come back from Paluxy, Texas, after next week, this will be the 4th week of July, and we'll put the discount back up on the site. So we'll have 20% off on all our products. Okay? So now let me get to our questions for today. We'll see how fast I can get through these. All right. Truth Seeker, you are there again. You responded to 2 videos by CoolHardLogic. He made 10 total on geocentrism. Have you seen them? Why didn't you continue to make videos responding to CHL? Gosh, that's a long time ago. Because the time, just the time. My time is very limited. I have to be very judicious about how I spend my time. So I did a couple of them, and then I thought I did a few more, and I don't know what I did with them. I don't even remember. Because that's like about 5 years ago. But if they are available, they would be on the GalileoWasWrong.com website. Okay, so check that out, Truth Seeker. See how many of those CoolHardLogic critiques that I did up there. But let me just say this. I went through their videos, all their videos, and there's nothing impressive there. Okay? Nothing that can't be answered, so don't worry about that angle of it. But another thing that turned me off about them was the constant use of the F word and the constant denigrating of opponents who, and of course, they don't give their name, who's making it. It's just called CoolHardLogic. These kinds of people, it takes a lot to stomach them. Anybody who doesn't give their name so that I can find out who they are and look at their background and what motivates them, who's paying them. I'd like to know that also, because some of these videos, you've got to be pretty adept. at making videos, and you got to have some money to make those graphics. I know, because I made a movie. So somebody's behind them, but they don't want to give their name. So I have a hard time with that. So perhaps I can go back to some of them sometime. If they stopped at 10, that makes it a little easier, because I didn't know when they were going to stop at that point in time. I just wanted to make a couple to get them out there so that the geocentrists had something to go by. But then I ran into other stuff. You know, we were making the movie at that time, The Principle, and that took, you know, most of my life to get that done. So anyway, okay, let's see what else we got here. Some flat earthers say that the Tower of Babel was built because they were physically trying to reach God. We know we can't do that. So what do you think the purpose was of the tower? Good question. I think there were two reasons for the tower. One was to try to see how high they could get. You know, if you have a notion of God that's just above the clouds, so to speak, and you think he's physical, like you're seeing your fellow human beings, yeah, you might be tempted to go up that high. You know, we do the same thing in our day. When they shot the Apollo rockets off, or the Gemini rockets, and they went around the Earth for the first time, or they went out to outer space, what were some of these astronauts saying? You know, I saw the face of God, or something spiritual, okay? Because they didn't know what to expect out there. All right, maybe there would be something that surprised them. And men, because God has instilled his knowledge of God in man, he's always thinking about God, whether he admits it to you or not. Every person on the face of the earth at some time during the day is thinking about God. I'm telling you, that's the way it works. That's the way God has built us. Now, they'll do their best to tell you that, oh, I never think of God, or no, they're thinking. Okay. Plus, they have a conscience that they can't get rid of, that God's built into us. So it's all there. That's why God says in Romans 1:20, nobody's going to have an excuse when they stand before Judgment Day, because you know I exist. No argument. All right. So that's what these guys see when they're look. Is God out here? Yeah. That's what we get from expressions that they gave to us when they came back. Okay, so same thing. It's just a tower, you know, thousands of years ago, as opposed to a spaceship. Same thing. All right? But there was a little bit more to this Tower of Babel than just trying to reach heaven. At this point in time, what had God told man? He told Adam and Eve right from the beginning, and then he told Noah right after he came out of the ark, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Okay? And that's a mandate. It's not a suggestion. This is God's command. Why? Well, because God's going to make a race of people that someday he's going to take into the eternity, and they're going to be with him forever. That's the whole purpose of this earth. Okay? So you have this message from God, be fruitful and multiply, but that's a lot of work, isn't it? Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of pain. Now you're responsible for somebody else, and you can't live life the way you want to. Just like today. You know, why don't a lot of these women's libbers want to get married and have children? Oh, see, that's too much work. I don't want to stay home and be a mom. I want to get out into the workaday world, and I want to compete with men. You know, and I want to make something of myself, and I want to have a big name and make a lot of money. Yeah. I know a lot of women who wish they didn't do that, because it's not all it's cracked up to be, that's for sure. Yeah. You want to come into the man's world? Welcome. Yeah, we'll show you how tough it is. You want to see what dog eat dog really means? Yeah, you come into the man's world, women. Find out what it's all about. See how long you survive. Anyway, before I get off on that topic, so they have this command to be fruitful and multiply. And, you know, hey, these people just came out of the flood. We know how bad they were. God wiped out the whole world. So just the next chapter, they're already doing something bad that God doesn't want them to do, and that's to make this tower. So things have not really improved much, have they? No, they're still on the same bent that they were before. Except God already promised that he wasn't going to destroy the world again by a flood. The next time would be by fire, which is at the end of time. So, but they're still on their trek, okay, of evil. And what is the thing that the tower's going to do? Well, the tower's going to be high, and so everybody's going to be able to see it. And everybody can come and congregate at the tower. And that's where all the business is going to be. And that's where all the people are going to be, all the big shakers and movers. And you'll probably have a nice water supply. And you'll have all the conveniences of life back in 4,000, 5,000 BC, whatever. And all the other places around weren't settled. Who knows what's out there? Okay, so you're not going to get anybody being the pioneers, so to speak, like they were when they came from Europe to the United States, the pioneers who went out west and all this. Man, those people were brave. Of course, they heard that there was gold out there in California, and that's what motivated a lot of them. They had 300,000 people fill California within 1 year once they found out there was gold out there. Okay, so you see what motivates people to move. Otherwise, they're going to stay congregated together and live comfortably. Okay, and that means, well, we don't have to go out and be fruitful and multiply and, subdue the face of the earth kind of thing. We just can congregate here. And so what did this become? Well, this little tower here became like a practice of birth control, so to speak, where we can live comfortably. We don't have to really multiply here. We have enough people, and there's no reason to go out and start populating the earth because we're all together here in this tower. And life is hunky-dory. Okay? And besides that, we can get right to God if we want. So they thought. So what did God have to do? Well, he had to come down and confuse the languages so they couldn't understand one another. What did that force them to do? Well, that forced them to spread out. Okay? So you're only going to stick with the people that speak your same language. And so those people went north, and the other people who spoke a different language went west, and the other ones went south, and the other ones went east, and everywhere in between. I don't know how many languages God created, but enough to make them spread out. The tower was gone, and now they had to obey. Because if they didn't have children, then of course they wouldn't survive, and all that brings. So that's another reason that God was against the Tower of Babel. Okay? Oh, very similar to what we have today. All right, Philip says, Dear Robert, yoga, healing, and martial arts are only 3 of many practices through which people in the West can get lured into Eastern religions, or at least away from Christianity. There are more than 10 times as many yoga teachers than Catholic priests in the U.S. Oh, that's amazing. Of course, with the little priests that we have today, that's not so amazing compared to what we had like 50, 60 years ago. Even then, they wouldn't have matched the yoga teachers, but I don't know how many yoga teachers they had 60 years ago. And Philip says the same goes for the rest of the Western world. Is there an explanation why Christianity hasn't developed or sustained similar physical practices to get and stay physically healthy? Were they suppressed? Isn't 1 Corinthians 6:19, our bodies being temples of the Holy Spirit, relevant in this regard? Yeah, well, I think you hit upon a dimension of our Catholic life that needs a lot of work here, Philip. So thank you for mentioning this. I assume the fact that you're mentioning yoga and martial arts as a seducer of Western mentality. Yeah, a lot of people don't know the origins of yoga. They think it's just an exercise, and it's actually a religion. You know, it's like the Shriners. You know, they think that they just help children in hospitals, and it's actually a religion called Freemasonry. Okay, so a lot of things that we think are innocuous on the surface level, and that's the way they want it, of course. They don't want you to penetrate down to the things they really believe in. Okay. When you go deep down, you find out that, yeah, they're all based in Eastern religions, you know, whatever. Shamanism, Zoroastrianism, you name it. Eastern religions have permeated the West to that regard. But as far as taking care of your body, wow. Yeah, Catholics really need to brush up on that. I mean, yeah, I mean, somebody should take that up. I mean, really. Catholic exercising. I mean, you want to pray the rosary while you're exercising? Great. Maybe that'll give them incentive. Who knows? But if you'll notice, all the saints that we have, was anybody obese? Except maybe the dumb ox, Thomas. I don't know of any. Of course, and we do, I think we know, we have some semblance of what they looked like, but nobody was fat. But today in America, whew, and I'm a few pounds overweight myself. I am presently on a diet, believe it or not. And yeah, sitting here at a desk all day long can really put the fat on without you even noticing it. And so I had to get into an exercise routine, and now I'm exercising every day and watching what I eat. But man, that can get away from you. So we need work on that. We definitely need work on that, because the more overweight you are, the less longevity you will have. I mean, it's just a fact of life. Heart disease and cancer are still the two biggest killers in the United States today. 80% of the people die by heart disease or cancer. And then there's kidney disease, and that runs another 5% or so. Okay, so yeah, 80%. And heart disease is preventable and curable if you're not obese. It's just a fact. Okay, cancer, a lot of it has to do with what we intake, whether we breathe it in or we consume it. We have foods today that are just horrible. They have so many chemicals in them that you're wondering what you're eating. Preservatives, sugar and preservatives, two basic food groups. Yeah, I mean, it's just, and it gets worse every year. And the capitalist economy just drives these industries, food industries, to make food that is cheap, fast, and tasty. And that's going to take a lot of salt, a lot of sugar, and a lot of fat. And you mix those things up, you got a deadly recipe. And that food kills us. And then, of course, we eat too much of it and they make the food that way. You go to McDonald's, yeah, they put the chemicals in there to make it taste a certain way so that you're craving for it. You can't stop eating it. The French fries, the hamburgers, whatever they're putting inside of them, these guys got it down to a science. Okay? McDonald's is now all over the world. I remember when I went to Russia, one of the first things I saw outside the hotel in Russia was McDonald's, the way they spell it in Russian. And I learned a little bit of Russian so that I could pronounce it. McDonald's. Jeez. And they had the same stuff that we have in America. And people were lined up around the corner. So, I mean, it's everywhere. Poor Americans, and then, of course, the women are out working. They're not home. And so who's cooking the meals? I mean, if you want to cook a good meal, sometimes it might take you an hour or two. Or to go get the ingredients at the store. Who's going to do that? Get fresh ingredients so that you can cook it at home, serve it to your family. Yeah, we're talking some hours there. Who's going to do that if the woman's out working? Now, what you're going to do is you're going to go to McDonald's or you're going to order out, and that's going to be expensive. Okay? You can make a meal at home for 1/10 what you would spend out. Okay? So, and of course, you don't get the camaraderie of family meals where everybody's sitting together and talking about the day. Hey, how was your day? How was your day? And, can I help you with this? How much homework do you have? And you find out and you assess everyone's day and see where they've been and what they've done and have they problems or not, blah, blah, blah. And you can share that over a meal. And, man, those days are hardly here anymore. That's why you see it everywhere you go. There's restaurants loaded with people. And, of course, it's not now because of the COVID problem. But prior to that, I was looking at these restaurants. How in the world do they get people filling in these places during the weekdays where they're standing room only? What is it with these people? Nobody cooks anymore. And that means you're eating junk or you're eating very expensive meals. Okay, somebody's going to have to pay for that labor, and it's going to be you. So, wow, we've come a long way, and look at our society today. I mean, walk down the street. At least 50% of the people you see are obese. I mean, morbidly obese. Your typical city, walk down the street. Okay? If you walk in China or Japan, Africa, even South America, Mexico, you don't see that. I've been to these places. Maybe a couple here or there. In America, it's like the whole country's obese. And the more we eat, the more they feed us. And you know what this is? This is the sin of gluttony. That's what it is. It's a sin of gluttony. And a lot of us are guilty of it. And I look at the priests, the bishops in the United States. I don't think I've seen a skinny one anywhere. There's a few here and there, but most of them are obese. Most of them are just unhealthy looking people. And this is the kind of example you're going to give to your congregation. And hardly any of them do exercises. Yeah, I mean, well, a lot of them, their whole day is centered around their 3 meals. Okay, I know, because I've been in rectories. I've watched these priests operate. I know what they do, and I know what they live for. Now again, this is not everybody. Okay, there's a good majority of them that are not living, physically at least, the way they should be. And a lot of them are guilty of gluttony. I remember my father was a doctor, and I remember there was a priest, very popular priest, who was the principal of the high school there and well known everywhere. And he was obese. My father was his doctor. And my father was the only Catholic doctor in the whole area there. So he got all the Catholic schools, all the Catholic churches. They were all going to him for his doctor. He was a general practitioner. So he had quite a range. At any rate, he kept telling Father to lose some weight or he's going to die. And it was that bad. It was that much overweight. And, this was going for years. And he didn't do anything about it. And then my father, one day, Father came into the office and my dad said to him, Father, let me just be quite frank with you. Do you know you're committing the sin of gluttony? Wow, that hit like a ton of bricks. That was like, you're telling me, the priest, that I'm sinning? Because, he had this jovial personality and everybody loved him and they probably didn't mind him being obese. Maybe that was just part of the whole shtick. Like Santa Claus, who knows? Who can imagine a skinny Santa Claus? But at any rate, that was the last time my father ever saw him. That was it. He couldn't take it. That somebody dared say that he was sinning by committing the sin of gluttony. That was it. It's over. Who? I don't know where he went after that. I was old enough to understand what was going on. But wow. Anyway, I spent a long time on this, so let me move on. Dr. Jonathan, greetings from New Zealand. All right. William says, Mr. Sungenis, on a previous show, you mentioned the Catholic Church has a pedigree that dates back to Jesus and mentioned other religions lost their pedigree at some point. Can you elaborate? No, I didn't say they lost their pedigree. I said they didn't have a pedigree. Okay. The only ones with the pedigree are we, the Catholics. Why? Because our whole tradition stretches back to Jesus and the apostles. Okay, we number our popes from Peter, and then Linus, and Ecletus, blah, 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 all the way through in perfect succession. And they go right back to Jesus and the apostles. So that's the pedigree. Nobody else has that. Even the competing religions at that point in time, let's say the Manichaeans that Augustine got involved with, they started after the church started, and then they died out not too late afterwards. Okay, or you take any group, and so obviously they didn't have a pedigree when they started, and then they ended very quickly. Okay, and it's the same thing with the Protestants today. Let's just take take the Lutherans. After Martin Luther, how long did they last? First of all, their pedigree, they have no pedigree, obviously, if they've come 1,500 years after Jesus and the apostles. There's no pedigree there. And Luther could claim all the pedigree he wants. Well, I follow Augustine, or I do. He didn't follow Augustine. he picked and chose from Augustine what he wanted to believe. Everything that Augustine believed that was Catholic, Luther rejected. So he wasn't following Luther. It wasn't like there was some chain between Augustine and Luther. Calvin did the same thing. Oh, I follow Augustine. No, you don't. Who are you fooling? Okay, so, but how long did the Lutherans, the pure Lutherans after Martin Luther, how long did they last? About a generation. Yeah, because Melanchthon, who was Luther's protege, came after and started to change Lutheranism back to where it was before. I mean, back to some Catholic ideas, especially about double predestination and all that stuff that Luther got excommunicated for by Pope Leo X. Okay, already in the second generation, Melanchthon knew something was wrong with that. And by the formula of Concord, they had come halfway back to where they were before. So that pedigree didn't even last long, as late as it started. Okay? Same with the Calvinists, same with the Wesleyans, on and on and on. Then the Baptists came along. And how many denominations do the Baptists have today? Oh, about 150. Different kinds of Baptists. Why? Well, because they all disagree about what the Bible says. And so how much of a pedigree is that? Well, they didn't have any when they started, because they came 16, 1700 years later. And then they, within a generation, they were all changing the doctrines and going off and starting other churches. It's just an absolute total mess. Okay? And then you have all the liberal Protestant denominations, those that call themselves, Baptist, Presbyterian, that don't have a clue what the Presbyterians and the Baptists ever thought before, because they've rejected all of Christianity, and you just go by the name. They all like to have the name of being Christian, but they don't like to live the life of being a Christian. That's what you call liberal. And we got them in Catholicism too. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is we're the only ones with the pedigree. Okay. So you want to know where the true religion is? It's the one with the pedigree. Who's that? The Catholics. Okay. Say what you want about these Catholics. The fact is, historically speaking, they have the pedigree. All right. Hello, Dr. Sungenis. We see in the Old Testament God changing his mind. If God can change his mind, does it mean that God can change, even though the Bible also says that God is unchanging? Good question. By the way, I have a book on that whole subject, as some of you know. Where is that little rascal? It's called The Immutable God Who Can Change His Mind. All right, so what does that tell you? The title. He's immutable and doesn't change, and yet he can change his mind. Whoa, there we got a subject, huh? What does all that mean? The immutable God, the one who can't change, can change his mind. Whew. And then the next title of it is The Impassible God Who Can Show Emotion. Now, impassible means cannot be harmed, destroyed, hurt, but yet he can have emotion. Okay. So, well, there's a subject for you. Now, this is the product of a dissertation I was writing at Maryvale Institute many years ago that, for reasons I don't want to go into right now, I never did get it completed. But then I picked it up again a couple years ago and just decided to finish it. And so it's on our website, robertsungenis.org. So if you really want to know the ins and outs of this, go read that book. Okay. I mean, I go through every wrinkle, as I usually do when I hit a subject like that. And this was a dissertation, so this had to be top-notch, no stones unturned. I had to get all the resources, and there's a lot of them out there, believe it or not, on this kind of subject. It's a widely talked about subject, at least among scholars today. So, so you would want to get that. And let me see. So first, let me just basically try to say it, and then I would suggest, please go get the book and read the rest of it. But God is God. If God could change, that is in his substance, okay, we're going to talk a little metaphysics here, then he wouldn't be God, okay? In order to be God, you have to remain God. So metaphysically speaking, your substance can't change, okay? So, and a lot of people like to say, well, God has no potency, just this pure act. Yeah, not too sure about that one, because you put a lot of limitations on God when you say things like that. That, for example, we might say, was God forced to create the world? You know, if God's a determined being that's pure act and no potency, wouldn't that mean he was forced to create the world? Because he eventually did create the world, didn't he? Okay. So if that's the case, did he have the opportunity to decide not to create the world? See, now that's an instance where it's not pure act. You have a potency there that's waiting for some fulfillment. But if he decides not to create the world, that potency never came to fulfillment. So it can't be a pure act, can it? And yet the church tells us that God had the free will to decide whether he was going to create the world or not. So much so that he was not determined. There's no law behind God saying you must create the world. Otherwise, that law would be God telling God what to do. So God can't be predetermined somehow to be forced to create the world, because he wouldn't be free. So the church sees that dilemma and says, no, we can't go that way. Can't make God a determined being in that sense of the term. We're going to have a God that has free will, and yet still know all that's going to happen ahead of time. Now, shake that together in your little box. See what you come out with. Yeah. A little bit confusing, isn't it? Okay. So there's a lot of things we need to be careful of. Now, let's say take Thomas Aquinas. Now, he would interpret Malachi 3:6 and take it out of context, unfortunately, and say, well, it's where God says he does not change. And Thomas made that a metaphysical principle and says God cannot change. So God's immutable. Okay, I mean, yeah, I understand God's immutable. I already said that. But does that mean God can't change his mind? That is, can God say something at one point in time, and then something happens, some contingency, and then God says, okay, I'll withdraw what I said, and change his mind? Well, that's all over the Bible. Okay, look at Amos chapter 7, where God says, you know what? I'm going to destroy you with fire, and here's how I'm going to do it. And then they repented, and God says, okay, I'm not going to destroy you with the fire. I changed my mind. He actually says that. I changed my mind. Okay. So we either take that as an historical event, or we say, oh, well, that's just, poetic license or something by the narrator. Really? That's where you want to go with that? I don't think so, because that means you just called God a liar. And that's one thing we know about God, is he can't lie. Okay? So don't tell me God's going to make up stories about himself that aren't true and inspire someone to write them in the Bible. That's not going to work. Okay? You take it at face value. That's what God said. That's what God meant. Okay? Now, why could God do that? Well, because part of God's whole nature is the fact that he can change his mind in a circumstance like that, based on contingencies in the circumstances. Okay? It's already built into God. Why? Because he's not a determined being. That's why. He has free will, and there's his free will being exercised. All right? So the problem with Thomas when he took that passage, Malachi 3:6, out of context was if he looked at the context, it would show them that it wasn't a metaphysical truth that was being taught there. All it was, first of all, God's complaining to the people of Israel that they had no integrity. They say one thing and do the next tomorrow. Okay? That's the kind of people they were. He could never depend on them. He didn't know what he was dealing with. God was. And so he says, look, I'm not like you. I don't say one thing one day and then change it the next. Pull the rug out from somebody. I don't do that. I don't change. If I say something, I mean it. I'm telling you the truth. I'm not going to say one thing and then do another thing tomorrow to you. How could you depend on me if I did that to you? Okay? So I'm not going to be like you. You little, whatever they were. Okay? So that's what he's saying in the context. I change not in the sense that I don't shift like the wind like you do. Okay? If I make a promise to you, I promise it to you. That's what God meant. So it's just an historical narrative that needs to be put in its historical framework. And it has nothing to do with metaphysics. Nothing. Okay? And yet for 800 years, we've been looking at this verse. Oh, well, God's immutable because, God changes not because that verse says so. But nobody looks at the context. And this is the problem with a lot of Catholic exegesis, believe it or not. We talk about the Protestants taking verses out of context. The Catholics are just as guilty of it, believe me. Okay? If it wasn't for the fathers and Jesus and the apostles giving us the correct interpretations of some of these passages, no Catholics would ever come up with it. Okay? The glory of the Catholic Church is that we have a tradition that gave us the correct answers on a lot of the most important topics, and a lot of councils who reason these things out to bring us even further. But without them, wow, we would be lost. Okay? So, as you can see, there's a lot to this, all right? And so I highly recommend that you get my book, The Immutable God Who Can Change His Mind. Okay, and find out what the ins and outs of this are. Okay, and the fathers struggled with this too. They were half on one side, half on. They didn't know which way to go on this. So this becomes an important topic. Okay, Augustine split down the middle on this thing, and you got a lot of the earlier fathers who were much more amenable to taking Scripture at face value on these things than you had with the latter fathers. It just got stuck in a little rut, so to speak, without being able to expand their mind to see, wow, what kind of God are we dealing with here? And it became too tempting to put God in a box and try to make him conform to the way we were comfortable with him instead of the way Scripture talked about him. Okay. One of my favorite passages, Exodus 4, is it, because there's a lot of talk in Catholic scholarly works about the fact that God has no anger. And I just flatly disagree with that, okay? Because that's not what Scripture tells us. And the way these Catholic scholars explain it, for example, Ludwig Ott, in his Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma, says that all anger is in the Bible is God's retribution, God's, punishment of people. And so whenever you read God angry, just substitute God punished somebody. No, that's not the way it works. Okay. Now, granted, there are a lot of places where God gets angry and then he punishes people. I mean, that's a logical consequence, okay, or a logical sequence. But there are dozens of passages in the Bible where it says God got angry and never did anything about it. There's no punishment, okay, no calamity. For example, Exodus chapter 4, where Moses is complaining to God that he has a speech impediment, can't speak the way he wants. And of course, God knew this ahead of time, but he picked Moses for his character. And, he believed that he could overcome the speech impediment. But Moses is a little coward at this time. And he doesn't want to lead. Maybe he's just using it as an excuse that he doesn't want to lead, and it makes it sound like he can't speak. Maybe that's what God saw. Why? Because the passage tells us that God got angry at him for giving that lame excuse. And here God's been preparing to lead these people out of Egypt for 430 years. It comes the big day, and Moses is cowering and crawling up onto a little ball and crying. Yeah, so you can imagine how God felt. Come on, man. I promised Abraham 430 years ago I was going to lead these people out. It's time to go. Pharaoh's going to destroy you if you don't. So let's buck up, mister, and get moving. Okay? And that's basically what happened after God got angry. He says, for the time being, I'll give you Aaron to be your spokesman. How's that? Let's get this job done. So Moses goes off and gets the job done with Aaron on his side. Okay? But then nothing happened to Moses. No calamity, no destruction, no punishment. Okay? So God, why? Because he's a personal being. That's why. He's not some rock in the sky, some automaton, some robot that has no feeling. No, this is a God with feeling who can get angry for something that we do that's wrong and let us know about it. Okay? This is what personal relationships are all about. All right? So, yeah, I mean, it's one of my most favorite topics, as you can probably tell. Because this is what really brings us close to who God is. I mean, think about that. It just boggles my mind. And I can recognize, because I'm made in the image of God, I can recognize his personality in Scripture because he made me the same way. Okay? Now, granted, I'm imperfect, and everything he does is perfect. So his emotions are perfect, his intellect is perfect, his will is perfect. Everything's perfect. No sin at all. But I can get a glimpse of him, of that perfect image, because he made me in his image. That's fascinating. And then when I find out, well, I'm not limited to intellect and will. Okay? There's also emotion involved. In every intellectual and movement of the will, there's emotion involved, because they're all three wrapped up together. And this is something the Catholic metaphysics has basically been blind to for 800 years. And it's time that it changed. Okay? And there are some scholars out there who are looking at it. Okay? But yeah, we really need to do a lot of work on that. And we're going to come closer to God as a result of it. All right, let's move on. Help, Dr. Sungenis. Fatima causes me the biggest struggle to the point I have to ignore it. Mary lived under a different calendar. How would she know Sister Lucy's for a secret to be revealed in 1960? I'm trying to figure out if your premise is logical here. Mary lived under a different calendar. What do you mean by that? I mean, Mary's in heaven. She has no calendar per se, except what's on earth that she sees. And so she comes on October 17th, or, pick that day because it coincides with something on earth. So where are you getting this different calendar from? I mean, because she's in heaven, she has no sense of calendar, no sense of time. Is that what you're saying? I'm not sure what you're saying. So Mary is going to know everything we know on earth and then some. All right. I mean, she's a heavenly being. She has her intellect that with her assumed body, which is going to be her perfect body that she's going to have for eternity. And thus her intellect is far greater than what ours is. She's going to know a lot more than we do. Okay. So I think you're not thinking of it right. Okay. That's all I could say to you right now. Colin, good evening. How are you? Nice to see you. William says, Dr. Sungenis, do you believe COVID-19 is as bad as it's being made out to be? No, I don't, to be very honest with you. The deaths, look, how many kinds of bugs like this have we had? I mean, I saw a chart the other day. Since the influenza of the 1918, was it, to the Hong Kong flu in the late 60s, to H1N1, to this, that, and the other thing, this is really no worse than any of those. And they all died out. Okay, we get the herd immunity going. We get now the deaths in New York City have dropped to 0. I heard the other day. So we're seeing a lot more people that are exposed to it, but we see many, many, many less deaths. 10% of what we had at the beginning back in what, March? So what does that tell you? That people can be exposed to it and it's not that bad. Okay? Yeah, there's some people dying, and the same people die in this problem with COVID-19 as they would do in the Hong Kong flu or the H1N1. It's always the weak people. But this is the way nature works. Okay? It's going to take the weak out and the strong survive. Yeah, Darwin was right about one thing. Okay? At least on a population level. That's the way it always works. So why are we surprised about this? Okay? Well, I think we were surprised because it was a new virus. We didn't know exactly how it was, but now we know. Now we know. So now we have this big fight between those who want to continue the scare and ramp it up so that we can bring this economy as far down as possible without destroying it. And why? Well, because we have an election coming up. And I'm telling you, folks, it's all about the election. We have never had a polarity in this country as bad as we have now. And I've lived through many presidents. And I can tell you that this division that we have is astronomical compared to what it used to be. There was always Democrats and Republicans, but there was never this force among the Democratic Party to go so left in their agenda and hate the conservative people who want to keep the status quo as I have ever seen before. And I don't know where it's going to end up. People are starting to shoot one another. Okay? That means civil war. And whether it's going to be an organized civil war, I don't know. You know what? Some of these things just take on a life of their own sometimes. And it only takes some small event to make the whole thing just burst wide open, if it's not already burst wide open. Okay? And then you have the globalists, the Soros people, and the climate change people, and all this. They all want to get together. They think somehow things are going to be better if they form this global unity, and they've been pushing for this for decades. And Trump's standing in their way. He's the last nationalist that's going to stand in their way. And they thought they had the deal won with Hillary. She was just going to be a puppet for the globalists. Okay? And basically their whole idea is to bring America down to the point where it has to succumb to the rest of the world. And Trump's the last thing that they want. He is a total antithesis of what they're looking for. Whether it's Ocasio-Cortez or George Soros or Bill Gates or Gavin Newsom or whoever it is, they're all in this together. Okay? Somehow, some way, they've all been educated by the same tutelage to the point where they are really showing their true colors. And we know that also by the fact that now they're attacking religious statues. Junipero Serra was gone 3 weeks ago in California. One of the most famous saints of California. I passed by his statue a few times when I lived in California. Okay? And Mary, desecrated in many churches. Some churches, I think there was an FSSP church that was bulldozed down or burnt to the ground over the weekend. Okay? So now we know what the real targets are, don't we? Yeah. Okay? So, you know, when they want to rip down George Washington or Ben Franklin or whoever it is, yeah, that's one thing. It's just a symbol of the total anarchy that this movement has risen to. And this is their chance. Now, it's all because of the election. And I think once Donald Trump gets back in, and I think he's going to get back in, he's going to come down hard on them. Because he'll have 4 years that they can do nothing about. They've already tried to impeach him. That didn't work. They've already tried to pin some kind of bad behavior on him with the Russians. That didn't work. And now they're going to use COVID as much as they can. Okay? And close the schools, close the businesses. They're going to bring them down as far as they possibly can. And they're all Democrats that are doing this. You know, whether it's Whitmore in Michigan or Cuomo in New York or Newsom in California, they're all in on it. Okay? They all know how to play these cards. And they're doing a pretty good job of it. But they don't realize how strong this guy Trump is. They really don't. They have met their match. The only thing I worry about is who's going to come after Donald Trump. Because if we don't get the right person in there, who knows what this country's going to turn into. Anyway, to answer your question. Vincent says, how would Mary know Spanish to reveal the secrets to the children? That would be Portuguese, actually. More than one pope seemed to get the consecration wrong, so it seems so confusing, not even the popes seem to understand. Well, the popes did understand, but they didn't do anything about it. That's the problem. Okay? As far as Mary speaking Portuguese to the children, come on now, okay? She's in heaven. We have abilities far beyond what we have on earth. That's one of the glories of heaven, okay? That we'll be able to do things like that. We won't need to do it in heaven because we'll all be speaking the same language, of course. And that will be infused knowledge that we'll have. This is one of the gifts that we're going to have in our new bodies. So don't worry about that part of it. The Pope part, yeah, you can worry about that part because these people didn't do what they were supposed to do. And I have a book that I wrote called The Consecration of Russia, How 7 Popes Led the World to Turmoil because not obeying the Fatima message. And I believe the Fatima message is over. Okay, even though I wrote that book 5 or 6 so years ago, it's over. There's no chance of doing the Fatima thing anymore. God just waited so long and it's over. I don't even think we had the chance to do it when John Paul II tried it. Now that I look at it, okay, because I found a document written in 1936 in one of Sister Lucia's memoirs. It said, didn't say it will be late. It said it will be too late. Somebody took out the word "too" from the original memoir, and that makes all the difference in the world. It's not going to be done late, as if John Paul II had an opportunity to do it, or Benedict XVI, or even Francis I. No, it's over. It's too late. That's what the memoir said. Okay, so Pius the 12th and Pius the 11th are the two culprits. Pius the 11th was told to do this in 1929. Come on, you had a vision from heaven. This peasant girl comes to tell you, Mary appeared to me and told me this, that, and the other thing, and to do this consecration. And you're right in the midst of this rough Russian Revolution, and they're going to take over the world. And you can see they've already done it from 1917 onward when Mary first came. So wake up, Pius XI. This message came to you for a reason. And Mary wanted it done right then. But instead, what did he do? He started making pacts with the Russians and the communists in the mid-30s instead of doing the consecration. As good as a pope as he was in other areas, he messed up here. Why? I don't know. I don't know. What gets into men? That they think they can skirt the commands of God and they're frightened by their enemies. Somehow, some way, their enemies get to them. And they make it appear that God's not going to do what he said, and he's going to leave you out on your own, and you're going to die. That's the message they give them. Somehow these men believe it. I don't know. So for the next, 10 years, to 1939, Pius XI doesn't do the consecration. I'd like to strangle him. I mean, think of how many people died and suffered because he didn't do that consecration. Think about it. And then we go into World War II. And that's horrible. If there's anything, and what did our lady say? She said in 1917 that if, we'll stop this war, World War I, but if the Pope doesn't consecrate Russia and the people don't repent, and the Pope has control over that too, making the people buckle under, okay? And he didn't do that either. And making the bishops do it. And he didn't do that either. She said there was going to be a World War II. She told us that 23 years before it happened, that this was going to happen. And lo and behold, Pius XI doesn't do the consecration. And what happens? 1939, Hitler invades Poland, and there you go. There's World War II, and it doesn't end until 1945. And then Pius XII gets in, and he is encouraged, do the consecration by Sister Lucia. And so he comes up with a consecration in 1942 that consecrates the world instead of consecrating Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And Sister Lucia says, Our Lady said, you'll receive some blessing for that, but not the real blessing that was intended by heaven. So a few years later, like 1946, she says to the Pope again, Pius XII, who was so good in many other ways, all of a sudden, just like Pius XI, he loses his, I don't know, what does he lose? What does he have? What is it that makes these men do this? He loses it, whatever he has. Somehow he doesn't believe in the full message of heaven given by Sister Lucia. And he's told by Sister Lucia in 1946, after she talked to Father Schweitzer, tell the Pope that I'm still waiting for the consecration of Russia. The gentle voice from heaven of Mary. And so that's what she tells him. Now it takes him a few years later to get his act together. And so in 1952, he tries it again. And what does he do? Well, he does consecrate Russia, so at least he was listening halfway. But then he forgets about all the bishops of the world. Now, come on, it wasn't that bad. I mean, there were some rowdy bishops out there, yeah. I mean, things were changing, but it wasn't that bad that you couldn't command these bishops to do a consecration of Russia in their own diocese all over the world. Come on. For a cause like this, what would have been a more worthy thing for you to do? At the command of heaven, for Pete's sake. So I'm having more problem than you are, Vincent, as you can see. I'm just beside myself with what these popes did. Okay? So basically it was over. It's over. The time is over. Okay? And then you got Paul VI, and then you got the whole thing with this fake Sister Lucy after 1958. They prop up this fake Sister Lucy, from Pius XII through John the 23rd, Paul VI, John Paul I, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis I. We have this, well, she died in 205, but John Paul II, same year as he died, so it was over then, but we had this fake Sister Lucy for all those years. What's she doing? Who's propping her up? What's her message? Okay? Yeah, this is a fact. Okay? We have science proving this to us. So that's why I'm saying it's over. It was over the second time that Pius XII failed. So all this work that Father Gruner did and everybody else is out there wailing for the consecration of Russia, it's a pipe dream. It ain't going to happen. Okay? It's over. And we can see the damage that it's done, as we were promised it would do. It just decimated the church. Where we're going from here, who knows? I just hope the Lord Jesus comes back real soon. I really do. I just hope that the time for the salvation of all the elect is done and he's ready to take us. I can't think of a better time than now. That's what I'm praying for. Because I think the rest is hopeless. I really do. Look around, I see it's just, the mentality of mankind, I just see no hope. And I hate to be hopeless. I'm not hopeless in the sense that I have a bright future ahead of me. Believe me, that's where I put my hope. But as far as this world is concerned, we're reaching that point, that apex, and we're real close to it, I think. And be on the lookout. That's all I got to say. All right. AJ says, Dr. Sungenis, I think you did it. I might be a geocentrist now. That's wonderful, AJ. I'm so glad to hear it. By the way, one of the books that I'm doing first in this audio books that I'm doing is the Geocentrism for Dumsky's book. It's for sale, not for sale. It's actually free on our website right now. So if you haven't gotten it, get a copy, a PDF copy of it. I'm putting that in the audio. I love that book the best of all my geocentric books. It's only 200 and some odd pages, but I just like it the best. And so that's the first one I'm going to put in there. So be ready for that on audio. You can listen to it in your car, your MP3 player, whatever. And anyway, let me get that done. All right. Okay. William says, take videos and pictures from your expedition. The dino dig. Yes, we will. Thank you for of course, you can't be without a camera today because you have your phone with you, right? It takes better pictures than some cameras do. So I'll definitely be taking those pictures, yep. And I'm going to try to bring home a souvenir of a dinosaur and human footprint together. Wouldn't that be something? I've never felt a dinosaur print, a real dinosaur print, so I just can't wait to do that. Hi, Robert. I'm just wondering if you've seen the film Silence by Scorsese. A lot of Catholics say it pushes the message that apostasy's okay, whereas others say it doesn't. What are your thoughts? I haven't seen it, Clinton, so I can't comment on it, but I would say anything by Martin Scorsese is a piece of trash. That guy's got a sick mind, as far as I'm concerned. And he does not speak for Christianity or for Catholicism. He speaks for Hollywood in one of the worst ways possible. Okay? So I'm just going by his track record. Now, I'll have to be fair. I didn't see Silence. Maybe he redeems himself to a certain extent there. I don't know. I'll take a look at it. As a matter of fact, I'll write it down so that I do him just service. I don't want to slight anybody without due cause. Although, he is right at the top of the list. All right. Shelley says, should the last rites be done before one dies? Or how long does a priest have to do it after one dies? No, that has to be done before one dies. I don't know of any exceptions to that rule. I've never heard of any, although if there is, I would like to hear it from somebody. But it may be the case that once you start the sacrament and then they die in the middle of the sacrament, you have the right to continue the sacrament. I think that would be allowed, but I think only that would be allowed. But I'm not the one who writes canonical law here on that issue. That's what we'd have to do, is to see in canonical law what the rule really is. Okay, so we'll have to leave it at that. Oscar, hello. Dr. Sungenis, what has been your favorite quarantine food dish? Mine has been pizza, and lots of it. William, I'm trying to stay away from pizza, so don't tempt me, okay? Pizza is just too good, especially we got this place down the street. Gosh, we had pizza last night, and I managed to have just one piece, so I'm doing good. But, yeah, gosh. The pizza business just never dies, does it? I mean, everybody and their uncle can sell it, make money at it. It's just something that just is, I like mine with a lot of red sauce on it, by the way. A lot of sauce. Yeah. I mean, I like good mozzarella cheese on it. And I like various toppings, but I always like the good sauce. Nothing like it. I do like pineapple on my pizza. I don't know if you do or not, but it adds that little sweet taste to it. But pepperoni's my favorite, of course. Here's another one I like. It's fried tomatoes. I don't know if you've ever tried fried tomatoes on your pizza. And you would think, tomatoes? Come on, we're already eating tomato sauce. But no, I'm just telling you, they just add another little kind of tomato sauce, tomato taste onto the pizza. It's just a little burnt, just a little, what do they call that? Caramelizing. Anyway, I'm on a diet, so yeah, I gotta stay away from that stuff. Dr. Sungenis, why do you believe that the Hebrew word for day has to be 24 hours? if there is no close to the seventh day. All right, well, let's clear up that confusion first. There is a close to the seventh day, okay? The seventh day had 24 hours to it, just like the other 6 days. Now, those who want to say that there is no close to the seventh day mean that, okay, so the Genesis writer didn't write, and there was evening and morning, the seventh day. And they say, well, he's leaving it open for this some kind of eschatological meaning and all that stuff. That can't be proven, okay? So I'm not going to base the interpretation of the seventh day on some may or may not happen eschatological symbolism of the seventh day, okay? The Genesis writer certainly doesn't talk about that. You may add that allegorically to your understanding or interpretation of Genesis, but that's not going to be the basis for how you interpret the seventh day, okay? And I write about this in my Genesis commentary, by the way, all right? Now, the Hebrew word for day, which is yom, I think it's crystal clear in Genesis, because every day begins the same way and ends the same way. And it says, and there was evening and morning the first day. There was evening and morning the second day. Okay? Everybody forgets that phrase for some reason. Everybody concentrates on the meaning of yom. That's not going to get you anywhere. Because yom has about 5 different meanings as it's used in Hebrew. It's used 2,000 times in the Hebrew Bible. Okay? Most of them are 24-hour days. But there's 4 other usages, not very frequent, okay? Like yamim is plural for day, okay? That's used in several places. You have, some of the Psalms or Isaiah talking about the day of the Lord, the yom of the Lord. Okay, well, that might be one day. It might be several different days, okay? Because the day of the Lord comes in various patterns and various times, and then there is one special day of the Lord at the end of the world, okay? That could be it too, but there's an ambiguity there, okay? But for the phrase evening and morning, there's no ambiguity. As a matter of fact, it's a phrase that's only used 8 times outside of Genesis, and in every instance, it means 24 hours, a day, that we would consider a day, okay? And that's in Genesis. So that's the main reason why I look at yom as a 24-hour day, because of the meticulous repetition in Genesis. I mean, I don't even write that way. If I want to make a point, and I want to tell somebody, like, I was in Rome for one day, as opposed to making them think that I was there for a week, I would say, I was in Rome for one day. But I wouldn't, say something like Genesis does, evening and morning, first day, evening and morning, second day, evening and morning, third day. I mean, it's like monotonous after a while. Well, there's a reason. Even though it is monotonous, a lot of people look at this and say, well, it doesn't mean 24 hours. Why? Well, because they're all preconditioned by the Big Bang Theory or whatever theory they believe in of how the universe started, that they think Genesis can't be right. It's a fairy tale. Okay? That's what most Catholics believe today. That it's all a fairy tale. That God really didn't mean what he said. In other words, God's a liar, is what they're saying. And you fools who want to believe in that stuff, well, you're not into science, No. Okay, so you got to be real careful. I mean, if you're going to read Scripture and you're going to believe that God's not a liar, and you're going to believe that all of Scripture is inspired and inerrant, well, then you're bound to believe what Genesis says. And if you don't, I don't see how you can be a Christian. I really don't. I really don't. because this fundamental of it's a fundamental sign of how you believe the rest of the faith or the scripture or the tradition. You just pick and choose what you want. That's what it really boils down to. So it's the first sign I look for. You know, how well do you believe the Bible, the tradition, what the church has dogmatically proclaimed? Let me see. Give you a little test here. And anyway, so long answer short, that's why. Okay. I have a paper. It is on the Principal website, theprincipalmovie.com. Okay, theprincipalmovie.com. And there I take to task a guy who said that the days of Genesis are not 24 hours. And it's a 50-page paper. What is his name? Jason somebody? And the title, 24-Hour Days of Genesis, it's right in the title. So go to the homepage of theprincipalmovie.com, scroll down, and it was like a year or two ago, I'm sure. So you might have to scroll down a while to find it, or maybe we have a search engine up there. I haven't been on that website in a while, but yeah, maybe I'll get Lawrence to put it up on our robertsongenis.org website for those of you who are interested, okay? So I'm not talking off the cuff here, in other words, okay? I've done my homework. I've looked at every angle of this, and I'm just giving you some food for thought on a much bigger topic, okay? And we get into the Greek and the Hebrew and the context and all kinds of things, okay? So just want to assure you that I've done my homework on it, all right? I'm telling you guys are going to stop watching the Redskins just because they changed their name. Please. They're going to get beat by the Eagles anyway, twice in the season, so it's not going to matter what their name is. Just warning you. All right, Dr. Sungenis, I emailed you and told Lawrence as well if there is a possibility of purchasing the geocentrism animations by digitally downloading it, just like, yeah, I wrote to Lawrence on that tonight, so we'll see what he has to say. These animations are all exe files, so I don't know if and then it's coming back. All right, so I lost connection with you guys. Now I'm coming back. Well, at least it's a lot better than the other one, because once I lost connection, then I lost all your questions. So I lost the whole thing. So this thing is a charm. All right, so all right, so Oscar, I'm trying to figure out what you're asking here. You're saying by the time we don't see the moon for a couple of weeks, is it because in its descending in its orbit to a lower latitude in the southern hemisphere, or because the light of the sun is not reaching it in such a way we can see it, or a combination of both? Yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking there, Oscar. Now, we can see the sun and the moon at the same time as long as both are above the horizon just a little bit, okay? So let's say the Earth is my head. As long as the, sun is here and the moon is here, you're going to be able to see, because we're going to exchange light, okay, right on that level. So you can see the moon at the same time. that you see the sun. You can see the moon in the daytime, of course. Now, since the plane of the moon's orbit changes sometimes, yeah, so it's going to be below the equator, and you're not going to be able to see it in the southern equator if you're in the northern equator. Okay, that does happen sometimes. The moon does shift around quite a bit, in and out. The plane changes, so that's why we see so many different kinds of moons. Sometimes we see the moon, it looks like it's going to hit us. It's so close. Other times it looks so far away. Well, that's because of the distance of the moon, it changes, the light of the moon changes, the atmosphere changes, the plane of the orbit changes, all kinds of things, all kinds of variables there. So, anyway, all right. How are we to understand Scripture when it says God granted Solomon wisdom and discernment when Solomon had many wives? That seems contrary to wisdom and discernment, right? It sure does. God just takes things a day at a time, okay? I mean, David, let's take David. He was a man of God. He was God's friend. He's called a man after my own heart, God says, of David. He's picked out of all his brothers to be the king of Israel. He's got 7 brothers before him. He's just the favorite lad of the prophets of God. And yet this guy falls into adultery and murder, 2 of the worst possible sins a man could commit. Okay, so what happened to him? All right, so in other words, we're taking it a day at a time. Okay, things happen in people's lives. This is why the Bible comes to us and says, keep the faith, hold on, don't fall into sin. Persecution's coming, beware. The devil's coming, beware, blah, 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 blah. Every chapter you read, okay? Because things can change, you see. And this is why we have to hold on to the end. It's tough. Okay. So Solomon got his wisdom. This was early on in his life when he's building the temple. And he doesn't ask for riches, which pleases God to no end. And God gives him wisdom. Why? Because he's going to have to run this kingdom. This is the premier kingdom on the face of the earth. All the nations around Solomon sent him gold, paid taxes to him. And he had them under his thumb. That's how great the armies of Israel were. Okay? And they had God on their side. What more could you want? So this Okay, so we have another instance of someone, I think my family upstairs is trying to use the internet, and we don't have enough juice. Anyway, getting back to Solomon, we've got about 10 minutes left here. The kingdom, as I said, starts to possess him, and he falls. Okay, so what does this tell us? You can start on the great path to the kingdom of glory. And something can happen. It's going to trip you up. Yeah. And sometimes when we least expect it. And sometimes it grows on us too, without us even being aware that it's there. And sometimes we think we're doing so good and we're being so righteous, and actually we're going down the path of the devil. Okay? So he's a perfect example of it. All right. The Protestant view fails to see that God can pronounce someone justified because God sees that the person has exhibited good conduct. If anything, the Scripture's use of to justify supports the Catholic view, since Scripture does not describe the word to an individual who has not shown righteous qualities. Okay, just one thing I would like to add to that. Math edges is you're right. God will pronounce, if we want to use that word, he'll pronounce someone justified who actually is justified, is the way we want to put it. And the way we become justified is not by good conduct, although that plays a part in getting us to that point. But we are justified because God's infused the grace into us, into our soul. Okay? So in other words, baptismal regeneration changes the quality of a soul from being dead to being alive by the Holy Spirit. It does that. And so in that sense, we say the grace of God is infused in the soul, and the soul itself is changed. And so when God sees the soul infused with righteousness, you're justified. Okay? That's the initial justification. And then the more grace we attain for our soul, sanctifying grace in the sacraments, actual grace in our good works, God sees the grace. It's infused again, okay? And God sees that and says, my justified person, okay? It's all about the grace in the soul that God sees. Real grace, real change of the soul, okay? As opposed to the Protestant view, which says, oh no, the soul's still evil, still a piece of dung. And the only thing that happens is that God puts a cover over it called Jesus. And so when God is looking at our soul, he hits Jesus, you see. You can't see our soul because it's covered by Jesus. And so God says, okay, well, I'm going to declare you righteous or pronounce you righteous. Even though your soul isn't cleansed, I'm going to declare it legally so because, well, Jesus is your covering. That's the way the Protestants look at it, at least most of them. Okay. So there's the big issue there. All right. So we've got 5 minutes left. Okay, see if there's any more questions here. Okay, hey Robert, another question I would like to ask is, what exactly is the difference between the Tychonian and the Neo-Tychonian model? Okay, so the Tychonian model is basically just the reverse, or the inverse, I should say, of the Copernican model. So with, it's hard to use my hands here, because everything's opposite. So here is, in the Copernican, here's the sun. Well, maybe I'll use this, my phone. All right, so here is the sun, and, the earth is going around like this in the Copernican model, okay? So in the Tychonic model, basically, you have, all right, so here's the sun, and that's going around the earth, okay, in the Tychonic model. Now the sun, let's just take away the earth, has all the planets. So here's Mercury, okay? So as the sun is going around the earth, okay, it's carrying the planet with it, okay? And all the other planets with it, okay? Now, if you look at that in a geometric framework, it's exactly the same thing as the Copernican model, except all you've done is switch the centers, okay? because every planet in the heliocentric system is at the same distance from any other planet as it would be in the geocentric system. Okay? So basically the Tychonic and geocentric, or the Tychonic and the Copernican, are geometric models. And sometimes people call the Tychonic model the heliogeocentric model. Okay? And yeah, that fits. So now the animations that we were talking about before that are on the flash drive, you get those animations, you'll see everything in black and white and color about how it all fits together. Tychonic, Neo-Tychonic, Ptolemaic, all that stuff. It's all there for you. I spent years making that for you. Okay, so take advantage of it. Now, the Neo-Tychonic, it adds a little twist, because now we're going to talk about dynamic forces, not just geometry. Okay? Now, what do I mean by dynamic forces? Well, you experienced it when you got up this morning. Your feet hit the ground. How did that happen? Because gravity pulls them down, right? That's a dynamic force, gravity. Okay, so when you let me see. When you took a shower today, if you did, and you made the water move in a certain way, or you made your towel move in a certain way. How does that happen? Well, it happens by inertial forces, centrifugal force, Coriolis force. There's all kinds of little forces that happen. We put names to them. Okay, so you're talking about a whole new system where you're saying, well, how does the sun go around the earth, or how does the earth go around the sun? It's one thing to see it in geometry, okay, one going around the other, but what's making the move? Okay, they don't just move by themselves, right? Right. There's forces that make the move. And where do those forces come from? Okay, well, one of them is gravity. Okay, the other are these inertial forces I was telling you about. Centrifugal force. You ever gotten on a merry-go-round? And the faster that merry-go-round goes around, in my show here. Anyway, that's all because of Coriolis forces. Okay, so that's what the Neo-Tychonic model brings. It now is going to introduce the forces that make things move, and it's going to include the rest of the universe, not just the solar system. So it's a much more comprehensive understanding of cosmology and geocentrism. Okay. And in this model, in the Neo-Tychonic model, the Earth is the center of mass. That's a dynamic term for the rest of the universe. Okay? Now, what's a center of mass? Did you ever throw a tennis racket before after you had a bad game? And what does that tennis racket do? Well, it wobbles. Okay? Why? Because it's not going around the geometric center, it's going around the center of mass of the tennis racket. Okay, and that tennis racket's weighted more on one end than the other. So the center of mass is going to be somewhere in that weighted end instead of the lighter end. And that's where you get these forces from, okay? So being the center of mass for the universe means that this is where the center of gravity is, and it's going to determine how that universe rotates around the fixed Earth. Okay, and the sun, on the other hand, is the geometric center, not the center of mass, the geometric center. And so combine those two together, and you get a really good system. Okay, Why? Because it can explain stellar parallax, it can explain stellar aberration, it can explain where the inertial forces come from to keep the stars in their orbits, and everything else. It explains a lot. So it's a very valuable system. That's the modern geocentric system, the Neo-Tychonic model. Okay? All right. It is 10 o'clock. I have to go somewhere, so I cannot stay with you any longer. But I'm going to copy down your questions here, and I will do them tomorrow. Now, remember, I will not be here next week. I'll be here tomorrow, but I will not. I'm trying to copy this thing here. Won't let me copy. Anyway, so I'm going to get going. We'll be here tomorrow, 8 to 10. We'll see you then. And then we will take things as they come. And I will go over these questions and see what I can answer in tomorrow's program. Okay? Talk to you soon.